Hello, hello, hello. Good morning and welcome from Ireland, actually, this time. Oh no, only over the road from you. So, welcome, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I am so excited about this. So, I'm going to start and we're going straight into it. Lou, I'm going to hand over to you first. Tell us who you are, what do you do, what's your journey? And then, Owen, I'm going to ask you to do the same and we'll go from there.
Okay, Grace, no problem. Brace yourself, Owen, because I've got a bit of a story to tell about how I got to be where I am today. Basically, my fitness journey started like a lot of people, I think, where I hadn't really paid it much attention to my sort of lifestyle as such as a youngster. Was enjoying myself, got to university, started to put on a lot of weight, and realised I needed to do something about it. And having sort of grown up in a leisure centre in England through my childhood because my mum worked there, I in my university holidays I went off and joined the gym in the leisure centre and started exercising that way. So actually, I have no background in sport. Participation, so I'm probably quite different to a lot of your guests, Grace. But I soon realised how incredible exercise was for your physical health, for your mental health. I really found a great amount of joy from the actual physical process of being active and doing exercise. So I developed an interest in it at that point. That would have been about 1920. At the time, I was doing a degree in psychology and management because I thought you had to do a management degree to have a sort of corporate career. Again, spoiler alert, you don't. But I thought the psychology part would be make it more interesting because, to be honest, a management degree sounded pretty dull. And I was probably right. So, so I did psychology and management for 4 years. And then I got a graduate job managing field engineers for BT. So I had no experience in sort of networking or IT at all, but it was a really great start to my sort of career as a manager and as a people developer because I knew nothing about the job that they did, and it gave me the opportunity to just work on how do I effectively coach them to be the best that they can be? Because my job wasn't to tell them how to do their job. My job was to help them figure out how to be as effective and as efficient and to get the most out of their working life as they could as well. So I basically stayed in a corporate career for about 7 years, but during that time, this interest in fitness was still developing. I did some fitness qualifications as an instructor and started working one night a week in exchange for free gym membership on the gym floor. And then I sort of discovered the joy of helping other people to get active. Um, and then it was sort of 2005, having had a very successful career at BT, continually sort of being promoted and being offered new opportunities, all of which I enjoyed, all around sort of customer service and customer relationships and troubleshooting and problem solving. I realized I needed to take my career somewhere where I felt I was going to have a bit more social impact. So I went full time in fitness for 3 years as a personal trainer, group exercise instructor, wellness coach, did lots of different things, absolutely loved it. But I was, I think, 4 months into my time as a full-time personal trainer when I realized that psychology was actually going to be the most important tool in my locker.
Mm.
So I went back to school, I went back to university, did a part-time MSc in health psychology. And that, for those unfamiliar with health psychology, is all about understanding what drives people's behavior and how we can use strategies and interventions and techniques to support people who are motivated to change their behavior to do so. Um, so I really got interested in that, decided I wanted to pursue the research side of things, spent the next 9 years as a full-time researcher at Coventry University, very much at what I like to think of as the sharp end, very much applied research, always motivated to do research that has a very tangible real world impact. So a lot of it was around developing interventions, of course, to support people to be more active, to support people with obesity and various other chronic conditions, to change their lifestyle in a way that would support better well-being. But also things like staff training to help them understand how to support behaviour change. Um, Really enjoyed that. Did a PhD by the publication route during that time, specialising in weight management behaviours and services during and after pregnancy. And then I did 5 years as a lecturer at Aston University. And through this whole time, I continued to work part-time in the fitness industry, also do some consultancy with various clients in the industry as well, and still get that same joy today from teaching a class or working with a client. And then, yeah, after 5 years as a lecturer, higher education became, pretty much an untenable place to work in terms of my own personal well-being and work-life balance. And I was looking for a change. So I was lucky enough to work for Grace for a couple of years at EXI, doing digital health as head of research, really looking at how we leverage the evidence base as well as contribute to the evidence base and try to accelerate change through technology. Um, and that's pretty much taken us to where I am today, working as a consultant and working on various research projects and consultancy projects, both in the fitness space and in the health and research space. Okay, I think that's probably enough from me.
Well, yeah.
I love your story. Every time I hear it, I learn something new. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot she did that. That's
Yeah.
part of the journey.
You forget quite how old I am, Grace.
I won't say old, but I'd say great, a qualified journey for sure. And it is
Yeah.
to your point, like as you not having a sports background is obviously very different. Myself and Owen are complete opposite in many ways there. So Owen, from one legend to another, over to you. Connect the dots for us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Lou and Grace. I think what the one line in everything you just said there, Lou, was you had a desire to help others get active. And I think that's probably what the three of us kind of are all aligned to, really, essentially when it boils down to it. So for my story, is similar to Grace in terms of it's a sporting background. So I was involved in the GA all my early life and played a bit of rugby, played a bit of soccer, played everything locally. Represented my county, represented my province in rugby, and then the injuries started to come. So I was spent more time on the other side of the line. So I was doing a lot more watching than playing in my late teens. And I knew I always had an interest in sport, so when I was looking to do my CAO, my university degree, I looked at sports and exercise science. I did a bachelor's of sports and exercise science in the University of Limerick. There they have a program there called their cooperative education program, where you spend 8 or 9 months abroad or in a fitness facility or a team, and you get field field exposure and field training. It's not just solely academia. So I was lucky enough to go down to the Chiefs rugby team in New Zealand, based in Hamilton, and once again lucky enough to win the Super Rugby title in the first year that I was there. 2 weeks before I was leaving, so this was the middle of August at this stage. 2 weeks before I was leaving, they offered me a 2-year contract, which I said yes to, and then I rang home and said I'm not coming home. So,
Good Irish story, to be fair.
yeah, yeah. So, ma'am wasn't happy. But it really that was my real entry point to the professional sporting game and that world, that high performance world. So all in all, I spent 3 years there, came home, finished my degree. I did 3 years with Munster Rugby in Limerick. I was working in the academy level in Limerick, so bringing through a lot of the stars in the teams that are there today, which is a really proud point in my career, that I've been able to influence those at a younger stage, and not just the people who've made it to the senior level already. And I was working away fine, and I got a call off a good friend of mine from New Zealand again, who I'd worked with previously, and he said, I'll meet you in County Offaly, right in the middle of Ireland. I'm doing a tour of the Shannon. So I went up with my now wife, uh, not knowing what was going to happen in the meeting. I thought I was meeting with an old friend, and he offered me a role in Japan. So I had to say goodbye to Munster, and I left for Japan for 3 years. So I worked with a team over there called the Kobelco Steelers. Um, and again, we won and the Japanese championship over there. So that's the new up and coming league in world rugby at the moment. A lot of the national stars from the Southern Hemisphere go to that league, and we've started to see a few Irish, English, Welsh, Scottish players also migrate there. So I got a chance to work there for 3 years and loved it. COVID had a small bit of a small bit of an impact on my lifestyle there, as we were in a bubble. We were a high performance sport, so we had to stay quite like we had to stay into the confines of the team. I didn't get to do as much traveling as I'd like to have done, but it was a really great experience. I came home after 3 years and had kind of felt like I'd done a sporting career in 9 years or 10 years. I had done my time in New Zealand, my time abroad. I'd done my time in the younger academy kind of level, and I had finished in almost like your retirement game out in Japan. So I'd done a full career, I felt. So I was looking for a different challenge and something that, like you had said, would have a social impact, Lou. So I linked up with a just a partner of mine, Oliver Maloney, and we decided to open up a fitness facility or a gym. And look, did we know a lot about what we were getting into? We thought we did at the time. Right now, we didn't. Um, but what we opened was a big commercial gym, and everything was going good, and we really felt like we were missing something. We were trying to get we were happy with our numbers, happy with revenue, everything was really good, but we were trying to have that social impact, like we were saying. We were seeing the typical people coming in, your under 35s, the female male split was okay as well, but we weren't hitting the over 40s, the over 50s. We tried some classes, tried to get people in, and no attendees. So we took a step back. I researched, you know, putting part of my learning from my degree and my career. It has to be evidence based, has to be best practice. What am I looking for here? What is the gap in the market? What isn't available to the public? So I went around Europe, and did my research and came back, and we decided to open up active life centers. So again, using that term because we're moving away from the term gym. We looked at everything that was wrong about our original facility, but was great. But all of the barriers that imposed on people, and we said, let's open up a facility that doesn't have those barriers. So we ended up opening up Matchbox Life, and the life being the important part of that. Maybe in time it might just be life. Grace, just we're working on that at the moment, but they're active life centers, and basically we're targeting everybody, but the majority of our cohort at the moment is over 40 years old. 70% are over 40. Our oldest member is 81 years old. We have a service that helps people with their chronic health conditions. We have trackable data. We link in with the GPs. We're working with the ARC research in Limerick. We're working with the University of Limerick. We're in talks with She Research in TUS. So we want to make this an evidence-based approach that has a high impact on people's lives, and that we can track over time, and we can actually say that we have bettered people's lives by doing this. So I've really stepped really far away from high performance sport, but I feel like I've kind of probably gone into high performance fitness, if that's a space at the moment. So that's my story to date. So we're currently, we've two locations in Limerick. We're looking to have a nationwide presence, and we're looking to have that influence and the social impact on the Irish public.
What's interesting, Owen, when you talk about your journey is, like, as I said, it's multinational first off, which is again typical Irish story where we kind of go
Yeah.
abroad, we look at different ways of doing things, and a lot of us come back and go, right,
Yeah.
here's what we've learned. But like, let's step back a second into the kind of you as a leadership style, right? So what did you feel from a sporting experience, and obviously phenomenal experience in New Zealand and Japan and here in Munster, like really elite, best of the best. What do you think kind of led you in your leadership style, or what influenced your leadership style? Because that's an important, like everything we obviously, we're a product of everything that happened to us. So what would you take from that makes your leadership style different, I suppose, or what's, effective and so on from a sporting world?
Well, I think, like, if you put yourself in my shoes, I went down to New Zealand as an intern. So I Lou, you did. I think you said you did one night a week on for a gym membership. I think
Mhm.
I did a total of 9 months unpaid down there. I knew that I wasn't going to get paid. I knew that it was more of a career propeller if you look at it that way. So I had saved up to do that. I did. Yeah, I did actually. Looking back on it now, I'd say my first intro to the fitness world was I ran classes for the wives of the players and some of the staff in our facility just to make it make some money to keep myself going. But so I think so I was an intern and that's really important to note. I graduated to staff and then I graduated, in my last role to a head of performance, managing a team. But I think
Mm.
obviously the teamwork side of it is very important, but you have that from my leadership point of view, I think I have that empathy that I can relate to people from a broad spectrum of positions. So I don't just have, I haven't just done a degree and then straight into a management position or bypassed some layers and some levels of our structures in teams. I had experience in every level with every cohort of player as well. So I could have a well-rounded, you know, approach when it comes to talking and communicating with all members of staff and all members of the teams. And I think that empathy, I suppose, shows a bit of vulnerability in how you speak to people because they
Mm.
can see that you were at my level before or I was at your level. And it makes the process of communicating a lot easier, a lot quicker. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest influences, I suppose, on my leadership.
Those early experiences are so important, aren't they? Even though, like yourself, when I was, playing at a decent level when I was younger. But yeah, my first gym experience, I worked in the gym when I was 15 because my mother was a hairdresser in the salon that connected to the gym. And everyone in that gym, it seemed like everyone, first of all, was an older adult because it seemed to have that population during the day that they come for aqua aerobics and then they go for tea and
Mm.
coffee. There's this lovely community of just active, healthy, older community building. And it's humbling, right? You're like, it kind of brings you back to basics of, activity is not just about being active and, looking well or being stronger, that it's a community and it's a way of thinking and a way of living. Lou, from your perspective, because obviously you came from a non-sporting background as well, like how did all that early days evolve you in your leadership style then? Because it's different from our experience.
Yeah, really different. And I think we've had this conversation recently, Grace, which is, you know, um, a great athlete is only great if they have a great coach.
Yeah.
You can't, it's very, very rare that an athlete is going to reach the very elite level without some really good coaching along the way. And I think that's what I discovered, as I said, in those early days where I was having to manage people who were doing jobs that I didn't understand. And I just naturally then adopted a sort of curiosity as well. I think, I wanted to hear about what their job was like. I wanted to learn about it. I did my poles and holes course. So I learned how to climb a telegraph pole and go down a manhole cover. Um,
I want to hear more about that story at a later point.
I mean, once I'd done the course, I never did it again, but I wanted to be able to say I'd done it.
Was it
Um,
called Poles and Holes out of
Holes
Courage?
and Holes, yeah, it's a
Okay.
great course. 5 days, 5 days.
Great naming. Marketing
Incredible
was
much,
good
yeah.
there.
Um, but yeah, I think it developed a natural curiosity. I wanted to understand what people's jobs were like, and I wanted to help them to be able to problem solve and to be able to come to me and say, this bit isn't working. And I think as a female, um, I just definitely had a very different approach to the male managers that they were used to, who would have been much more, authoritarian, I guess, and much more sort of, I'm the expert and you're gonna, do as you're told. Obviously, I'm simplifying, but naturally as a female and as a naive female, I was able to go in there and say, hey, just tell me about what's going on. I want to understand it. I want to listen to it. And, it started to make an impact because people realized that I was interested in them doing well rather than me doing well. You know, I didn't necessarily feel I had something to prove because I knew I'd never be able to do their job. I'd never understand it fully. But I knew that if my team were performing well, I would get some credit for that and I would get some kudos for that. And that would, you know, of course, benefit my career. And I've really just pursued that sort of coaching style through everything I've done. So obviously, when I was working in fitness, you know, really started to hone those skills as a coach in terms of helping people achieve their sort of fitness goals and their performance goals. But then, yeah, in a leadership sense, I think you know, taking that coaching style means that you're not trying to be the person who's going to have the medal around their neck, but you get the sense of achievement from knowing that you help them to get there, you help them to get that medal or get that achievement, and you know, have that genuine satisfaction from seeing someone else achieve and seeing someone else perform well. I don't, you know, I think that cuts across the fitness and the leadership space really well, because that's why we do it. We you know, we coach people for performance or fitness because we want to see them be the best they can be. And I think that as a leadership style has served me really well.
And you're right, it overlaps completely here, right? You want your team to be the best person they can be so that they can perform for the best fit, which means that you want your customers in this fitness sport world as well to be the best person they can be. So there's a massive knock on and overlap here. I'm going to go back. Owen, tell me more about the Matchbox life, because the concept of how it's working and also the data around, you know, women in particular here, because we know women are more inactive. So I, you know, myself and Lou are obviously very passionate here about how do we intentionally look at the problem and the barriers and the challenges and see what do we do different in order to support the industry to better serve it, because we have a global problem here. But you seem to have cracked it in a great way, because your population in Matchbox Life is phenomenally more female than male, and
Yeah.
you're seeing good health outcome and results. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like in our original gym, the split was a 50-50 split between male and female. But then if you look at our classes, the classes were more 75-25 or 80-20 female to male. So in our new facility, we work with Technogym's biocircuit system. So it's a pre-programmed circuit. It's all designed based off of your 3 RMs of your strength testing, and it's all individually personalized. So you log onto the machine and you work for 30 minutes on various machines and you're finished. We've based ourselves in shopping centers as well, so that you know people can come in, they can train, they can do their shopping and go home. But what we've seen is that it's not a 50-50 split anymore. We're seeing an 80-20 split from the off, female to male. So we're seeing 80% of our members are female at the moment. Which in one way, as you said, have we cracked the code? I don't know, maybe, but what we're seeing is what we're also looking at is that we've only got 20% of males coming. So we need to impact that as well. You know, we need to balance it out. But we're delighted with the uptake from the females. I think what helps us in that is that we have moved away from your typical, you know, gym. You know, our space is it's a very you know, we hold ourselves to very high standards in there. I think going back to what Lou was saying, what you're touching on a lot there, Lou, was your culture. So our culture from management to staff to members is kind of it's very obvious throughout. So it's almost a self-sustainable gym where people, active life center where people come in, they clean the machines themselves, they look after it, and they have a sense of almost ownership and kind of like what you were saying, Grace, there's a sense of purpose when they come into the building. It's not just to look good. We don't have mirrors. It's not to you know, to be, you know, to change your image as such. It's a space where you can train and like mentally you can metabolically, mentally, and then with consistency physically, they can see that they make changes. What we do quite well is that when you come in, you get baseline tested, strength testing, range of motion testing, body composition testing. So we can say to you in 8 weeks, in 16 weeks, in 24 weeks, when we test periodically that you are improving. If you're not improving, we can say we need to change a program, or we can, have a straight chat and say, look, you're actually probably not coming enough. You're not exercising enough. You're not pushing yourself enough when you're in here. So we can give real time, we can give live data to and feedback to people. A lot of our staff come from University of Limerick as well, and they come through the same process that I went through,
Mhm.
the internship, leading on to part-time work, leading on to full-time work. So we have a really good baseline of knowledge and accreditations that complement our services. So I think all of that has worked to give us a space that women in particular feel very safe to train in there and feel very comfortable training in there, and they believe in, because we can show them that they're actually improving.
Yeah. One thing you get skimmed over there as well is location. And location
Mm,
is so important. The fact that first of all it's easy to get to, there's loads of parking, it's in next to a shopping centre, and we still know that 94% of domestic chores are conducted by a female. So it's just kind of convenient, right? And as you said, it's quick, then it's 20, 30 minutes because we know everyone's struck for time.
mm,
So like the location, the simplicity, the no mirrors, I find really great because to your point of, I think we live in a society where we're always being judged, and obviously with more and more social media, you're still looking at, this aesthetics, and it is one thing on the fitness industry that I really, really want to change is that aesthetics. It's that like before and after picture. I'm like, stop it.
mm.
There's a health change. If somebody has reduced weight, great, but there's a health change has happened here. So that's the story. And I think when you have the data like you're looking at with that assessment and the strength training, you can see that you can tell a different story. And it's those different stories that we need to be able to amplify for someone who's sitting at home going, I don't want to go to a gym. It's intimidating. I don't know what to
Yeah,
do. And I don't know where to go. And all of that, the physical, psychological barriers that are in our heads before we even get in the door.
yeah,
I think that's to me where, to your point, is why I get so excited about what you're doing because we need more and more locations to go to be physically active safely where we don't feel negative about ourselves and we're just getting on with the physical activity to get stronger, fitter, and prevention and treatment of disease and so on.
well, I
Huge.
actually, you're right. And look, there's Oliver Patrick had a stat up recently that out of our Gen Zers at the moment, 60% of our Gen Zers are getting their fitness and wellness information from TikTok.
Yeah.
So look, we're at a really important kind of juncture in the fitness space, and we need to be providing that evidence-based best practice approach to our wellness. One of our members spoke to me recently. She had a cardiac event, and she's back training, and she's strength training with us, which we're really happy with. And she's progressing very, very well. But she said that, and to quote her, she said that when she comes in, she feels like she has a purpose. Her training is a purposeful training. It's not that physical. It's not that image. It's purpose. I need this to help me live. I need this to better my life. I need this to better my children's life. And she feels that, speaking to some of our other members and specifically the women in our facilities, that's what they're coming in to do. They're
Yeah.
coming in to better their lives, not just to look good, we'll say. So
Yeah.
um that was only just this week that I was talking to her about it. So it was good timing leading up to this podcast. But
They're the
it was
stories we need.
it was impactful. Yeah, it was very impactful.
There's more people like her than there is than the opposite. So,
Yeah.
I know you're doing a body of work around active pregnancy, and obviously you've done chronic conditions and so on. Tell us a little bit there because I know we don't want to exclude anyone, right? And obviously we're focusing intentionally and our work a little bit around the female because we're more inactive and because we're talking about women in leadership. But we obviously are different. As I'm going to mention in a recent post that I made, I turned 40 this year, and all of a sudden my algorithm is like menopause, is perimenopause, postmenopause. I'm like, whoa, like it just nearly flipped the script overnight. So there's differences. Look, physiologically, we're different. So tell us a little bit, Lou, about what's going on in the industry and how does it think you think we should be looking at the female customer, or organizations like Owens and others should be looking at the female customer that bit differently and intentionally thinking about it differently.
Yeah, and just to pick up on what you said, Owen, which I think is really important from a behavioral science point of view, we can't underestimate the power of the relatively small changes that you've made to
Mm,
the environment, and, as you say, to the culture. Because when we look at what the evidence says around the barriers to people going to a fitness facility, you've removed so many of those barriers, which is fantastic. And that's things like, being uncertain about what to do if you're not used to doing sort of structured exercise. I've had the privilege of seeing one of your sites, Owen, and being able to see how much guidance someone gets through their workout, the feedback that you're giving them all the time. That's a really important behavior change technique, seeing that progress, but seeing it in a way that's meaningful to those individuals, which for them is around health. As you say, it's not about aesthetics, it's not about losing weight, those kinds of things. And so then when we think about perhaps a pregnant audience or a postnatal audience, like any population, there's a really specific set of barriers and a set of facilitators to helping those people to be active. And I've worked with the Active Pregnancy Foundation for since its inception now. It's been going 5 years. And that's all about supporting active pregnancy and postnatal. And so in terms of what the industry, I'm going to say needs to do, because I still think we're a long way off. I think there's some really key things. The first one is we need to flip the script around risk. And again, I think that's something I'm sure, Owen, that you've put a lot of thought into when you're targeting perhaps, people who are coming along with some chronic conditions. People feel very icky about pregnancy, and again, this is probably because we have the majority of the large organizations of fitness are led by men, have very limited amount of women in very senior roles. And I've had many conversations with them where they'll tell me about their wives or the significant women in their lives' experience of pregnancy and how they managed to be active, etc., etc. But they haven't experienced it themselves. They genuinely will never understand what happens to a woman's body. So we don't have spaces yet where I would say we have 100% comfort level of everyone involved in running that space around having women who are pregnant or recently postnatal in that space. And yet the science, and you know me, Grace, I'll always come back to the science. It sounds like, Owen, you're on the science and evidence team too, for sure. The science is super clear. And I think one of the great examples of what's been done recently to help flip that script on risk in pregnancy is the Get Active for Pregnancy questionnaire. So this was originally developed in Canada. They're very much a leading force around the pregnancy and postnatal space. Some great work being done out there. And what the questionnaire does is it replaces a traditional PAR-Q. Because a traditional PAR-Q would have a list of boxes, and it would say, if you have any of these conditions, if any of these apply, you need to go and see a medical professional and be signed off. And again, we've worked in the healthcare space for a long time, Grace. And I'm sure you're familiar with this as well. The vast majority of medical professionals are fantastically knowledgeable about medicine. They are very, very limited knowledge in almost all cases around physical activity, fitness, and exercise. Yeah. So it was a fairly pointless exercise. So this questionnaire now puts the agency and the empowerment into the women's hands. So it's a questionnaire that says, go through this, discuss it with your healthcare professional. If you tick any of these boxes, this will explain what your risk is, and will give you guidance around contraindications, whether they're absolute, relative, but obviously in a language that the layperson would understand. So the woman can complete that, fully understand what her risk is around physical activity and what perhaps modifications and limitations she might have, and she can then decide for herself, okay, I feel good about being active during this pregnancy and I'm going to go and do it. We also have the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines in the UK, and they're replicated pretty much around the world. Hands up, I haven't looked at Ireland's, but the WHO and the American College of Obs and Gynae, they're all very consistent, these guidelines now. And the guidelines clearly state, if you're healthy and you have no pregnancy complications, if you were active before you were pregnant, you can completely carry on with almost all activities. If you weren't pregnant beforehand, you can start and you should start gradually.
Mm-hmm.
So those two sets of things that have really been designed for the population, not for the professionals, are really starting to change that conversation. It's about giving people agency. I do think the industry needs to catch up with that. So, we deliver training to all sorts of professionals, including exercise professionals, and that questionnaire comes as a shock to them. The CMO guidelines often still comes as a shock to them. So we have a lot of education to go. But I think we need to normalize seeing pregnant people in these spaces the same way we need to normalize seeing older adults, older women, etc., in these spaces. And to your point, Owen, about TikTok, which is absolutely, yeah, we all know the terrifying potential of TikTok and other social media platforms. But on the plus side, I think now what we're seeing with social media is we are seeing a proliferation of content from people, fitness content from people who are very different body shapes, who are different ages, different backgrounds. And I think that we can start to leverage that for good. And I think the big fitness operators are aware of that. I don't think they yet know what to do about that. And I'm sure when this podcast goes out, plenty of people will get in touch and tell me I'm wrong. But to your point, Owen, around if you open a big commercial space, can it appeal to everybody? I'm not sure if it can. I think we do need these active life centres that are going to be a different space that's going to welcome a different audience. I think there are, plenty of things we could do to increase the appeal of those big mass spaces and make the best use of them for population health. But yeah, ultimately we have to cater to different audiences because they have different needs, different preferences.
But 100%. Can I just jump in there, Grace? I was just to say, 100% agree. I think the big players in the fitness industry also have a responsibility, not just from the social media point of view, but if we're talking about older adults and if we're talking about how do we impact this cohort, how do we actually communicate with this cohort, it's not solely going to be on social media. So there's an onus on us nationally, each individual player in the industry to provide an education, to a local education, whether it's county-wide or town-wide, where you're educating people on chronic health conditions, educating people on exercise during or post-pregnancy, that there has to be almost series in place for people who don't get their information from social media. So I think that that's probably a space that isn't it's not readily available to the public. And I think that's a space that there's ability and there's a chance for growth in. And I think that would tie in nicely in with attendances and getting away from the flipping the script like you were saying. So I think that's definitely another avenue that needs to be looked at.
And Lou, we'll need to link these resources afterwards, obviously, so that because one of the things I have is the echo chamber, right? Like you're in the world of active pregnancy and the science and so on, and and you see probably I'm going to say 10, 15 research papers a week, possibly around this. If you're not in that echo chamber, you probably see none, right? And I've never been there, right? Hands up. So I don't have an idea of what it takes to be active while pregnant. Not a clue. And I don't have an understanding about what body changes are going on and and all of the complexities to go with it. And that's the reality, right? Unless you've been there, you don't understand it. And the vast majority, at least three quarters or at least a half of the population haven't been there and won't be there. So we have to find a better way to communicate. And to your point, Owen, as well, like if we're not finding other ways, like social media is great, it reaches our populations, but not everyone's on social media, right? And I have a love-hate relationship with the likes of Instagram. LinkedIn is fine because it's all professional. Instagram, like, oh, I kind of like my privacy. And obviously we have the Irish mentality of notions and staying on the ground and that kind of stuff. But we got to find different ways around it because, like, I don't know where my mother gets her education, for example, around her activity. I have no idea. She still reads the papers, physical paper, and which I find mad, but it is what it is. Still listens to radio. So we got to find more ways around it because there's so much evidence, there's so much research. I assume that everyone knows being physically active is the right thing to do at all stages of life, but that's not true. And there's a large chunk of the population in every country that's like, I'm concerned, I have diabetes or I have obesity or I have, I'm pregnant and the doctors, to your point, Lou, are kind of going, to be safe, take it easy because that's the safest in their head to do. Whereas actually, as Owen knows more than anyone as well, like the actual evidence is saying, don't take it easy. You need to actually be still very active and to the point where it's safe to do so. And there are different guidelines for that. We
Well,
got to connect those dots
yeah,
better.
100%. And you even one of the common questions that comes to me from leads and from people who are interested in joining is 30 minutes enough? So our biocircuit is 30 minutes biocircuit. So is it enough? So my follow-up question to that, I don't answer it. I come back with another question. I said, how much do you currently do? So I don't really do anything. And so 30 minutes is definitely enough, So there's a total there's a total lack of knowledge around it. And that's coming from the cohort that we're after as well. And there's a total lack of knowledge on what needs to be done. So yeah, 100% agree, Grace.
And
And
I
I'm
think
glad.
also, yeah, just to say as well, we've had a lot of public health campaigns around the benefits of physical activity. And I did some work a few years ago in the Midlands for a local authority who, wanted to do some more work around physical activity in their population, a sort of mixed population, some quite affluent, some, less so. And so we did a big survey of the population. And what we found was motivation for physical activity was like 95%,
Mm.
right? Everyone scored very highly on that conscious motivation. So people absolutely understand the relationship between physical activity and health. I think what they don't know is how to do it and how to do it safely, as you say.
Mm.
And I think we haven't had that sort of message. Um, and they also have an emotional response to the idea of being active that either comes from negative experiences in the past. So if you take me, for example, why was I not involved in sport when I was younger? Because I wasn't good at it. Like I couldn't really catch or throw very well. I couldn't run very fast. So for me, all the other benefits of sport were outweighed by the fact that I just felt really rubbish at it all the time. And there were other things that I could spend my time on that I felt I was better at. And we have that a lot with the general population. They just they don't have the confidence, they don't have the knowledge. It's not the knowledge about why, it's the knowledge about how. And they feel that it's going to be either uncomfortable or they're going to feel silly or they're not going to fit in. And that's where the type of space that you've created, Owen, is helping to overcome so many of those barriers. And I think really to your point around timing, when we were working with chronic conditions, the evidence is so clear that if you take someone who's completely inactive and just make them a little bit more active, the benefit of that is much, much bigger than taking someone who's quite active and taking them to meet the guidelines. And that message about just a little bit actually is going to drop your risk of X, Y, and Z by this much, I think is such an important message that isn't getting out there.
So to summarize that, because I think it's really important here, no matter where you're at, wherever's listening who's not already active, wherever you're at, every little bit above wherever you're at is beneficial. And it's never too late to start. And then we've got really great research recently around people starting strength training in their 60s and 70s and being like, it's never too late. Wherever you're at whatever age, with whatever condition, with whatever issues you have, it doesn't matter. Starting is the main important thing, and then every incremental increase is a benefit. So that's the kind of key takeaway. And thankfully, the evidence is very clear on that, regardless of the complexities of your health and background and abilities and so on. So if we can get everybody to get that bit, then it's easier to connect the dots to go, here's a location that happens to be while you're doing your weekly shop, take an extra 30 minutes, get your activity in, and your 3 times a week or whatever that is. So, and then it's purposeful, it's easy, it's designed to be simple, designed to have no judgments, designed to be a safe, educated environment. So that's important. Go back a second, just because I'm conscious that you guys have obviously come through from the very start of, being active and not being active right through to where you are today. And we're all in the same page going, we have a massive problem. We have more young people today, more inactive than ever before. And Lou, your physical literacy, something you talked about there, I was lucky that I was good at sport. So I had this constant validation of you're good at this. Hence I was like, this is great. I get rewarded for being able to run. Woohoo. I'll continue to follow a ball around the field, whatever shape it is, I'll do it. It doesn't matter. But how do we look at the people who are coming out of college, Owen has got interns and apprentice in his center. How do we educate and motivate the population coming out of these courses today to look at the broader population and not just the elite? Because there's a huge attraction to working with elite players, but that is, less than probably 5%, if not 1% in some countries. How do we get those populations to go, I want to help mass populations, mass people who have, the breadth of conditions and sedentary lifestyles and, the issues and challenges. How might you think about what's the lessons you'd say to this population and go, here's what you could and should and would, and what a lesson. So Lou, what do you think? What would you say to these people?
Well, interestingly, I think we need to start before they're in college. Right? I think we need to attract people into those degrees that don't come from a sporting background.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because as I said, I didn't come from a sporting background. And when I was working in fitness, I wasn't interested in training elite people. I got my satisfaction from taking someone who was really struggling to be active and helping them to be a bit more active. So this was always my destiny. But yeah, the people, and I started when I was 30 full-time in fitness. So as I said, I had a career before. I'd been around the block a few times. And of course, what I was seeing in the gym were these young people coming through who were, maybe, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, who were the sporty kids at school, loved PE, wanted a career in sport or exercise or fitness. And they were then really struggling to relate to the type of clients that I was working with, who were like me, who hadn't come from a sporting background, found exercise difficult. So I think we need to attract people who want to work in a health space, and have them be trained in exercise and fitness. So, big plug for health psychology. Currently you can only start health psychology, really as a postgraduate. There's very limited undergraduate opportunities directly to study health psychology. And actually, I think if we had further education courses around lifestyle change and behavior change, and I think we are starting to see some of that come in now. But if we had a career pathway that says, if you want to, help people be healthy, you don't have to become a doctor or a nurse. You can become a lifestyle coach or a wellness coach or whatever you want to call it. And actually, I've been doing some work with Europe Active recently to set professional standards for health coaches, which is a really useful exercise in terms of the professionalization of this type of work. But yeah, I think we need to attract people who have the motivation to help people be healthy at all stages of their life as well. And then perhaps the people coming out of the college and coming into the gyms will have broader perspectives.
That's a really good point. Owen, what do you think?
I think an apprenticeship model needs to begin in Ireland. I think if you look at an industry like baking in Ireland, bakers now for the first time in Ireland have an apprenticeship model. I don't which is fantastic. Ireland needs that. So like Lou was saying, you need to have a clear career path. So even if you don't go into university, there should be an opportunity to do an apprenticeship with a registered gym or a best practice gym or facility where you are provided the field, I suppose, training, but also you have credits that you must build up from the academia point as well. So I think that there's definitely that experience is needed, and that apprenticeship model is needed. I know that SkillNet Ireland, there would more than likely be interest there in doing that, but again, it needs the big players in the fitness industry in Ireland to be able to push this along. It's a no-brainer for me. It has to happen. It's going to increase the level of qualifications. It's going to increase the retention of staff. It's going to increase the quality of staff as well. and show that clear progression throughout their career. As well as that, and I know that's essentially just copying what Lou had said there, but but I do think that the other side of this is when people do an apprenticeship or go in at the early stage and do a health and fitness course in college, we'll say, um, that's kind of entry point one. Entry point two then is if we're looking to influence the say older adults or people with chronic health conditions, and I look back at what I kind of initially stated in my leadership style, it's the empathy side of things. So if you get people who want to have a career change in their later in life, we need to provide a pathway for them to be able to do that because those are the people who you want to be speaking to about how you're feeling at the moment, how how this is going to impact me because you've lived through it, or you're closer to someone who's lived through it, so I think that we need to be able to provide pathways for people to change their career as well as build their career.
I think that's so actually, I think that's nail on the head. And likewise, the two of you have talked about there. Let's look at one of the risks. So one of the ways it may or may not work. CrossFit do a pathway, for example, where you're a CrossFitter and then potentially become a CrossFit instructor. And I do have concerns about going from being the person under the bar to being somebody telling someone what to do. So where do you think what's the guardrails here to make sure that we have safety at heart here? Because obviously it's complex. There's a reason why we have at least 4-year degrees in physiology before you're trained. There's a reason for that. And there's the reason why it's a 4-year, psychology as well. So there's a lot of complexities to people. The beauty of what we're dealing with here. What would be the guardrails, Lou, that you might put in place if we were to look at, as Owen mentioned here, people in their 30s, 40s, whatever, trying to change career like you did as well, that was more focused on, being able to support more people from a real world perspective because they've been there, they're still there, whatever. What would be the guardrails, you think? Because I think the apprentice model is very possible. And actually, Ireland has got a great apprentice model for our trades, for
Yeah,
example, which needs to be on the CAO form. It's another
yeah.
conversation I'm sure we get into. But I love the apprentice model because it's real world, it's impactful. It talks about how you get people through the reality of the job as opposed to the academic, which might be book based and theory based, which doesn't suit everyone. But Luke, what are the guardrails you put in place in this one? Because it is, I think, an important, area to push for.
Yeah, so I think, we still have a big problem in the industry across many countries. There are a few countries that are better at it, but if you take the UK, for example, we have absolutely no regulation of exercise professionals at all. So you have to be like a physiotherapist before it's a protected title. And there are standards and there are you have to be a member of the Health and Care Professionals Council to call yourself a physiotherapist or a psychologist, for example. But as you say, that would be a barrier to people joining the industry later in life if they have to take years and years of qualifications. It's often not going to be possible for them to take a career break necessarily to do that. So I do think regulation would be top of my list. I think the exercise profession should be regulated, and I think that would go a long way as well to increasing its credibility in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
So that exercise professionals would be seen as more as peers to healthcare professionals, and that would foster a lot more collaboration and co-working. In the absence of regulation, I do think things like having professional standards. So in the UK, we have CIMSPA who set professional standards, and they've done some really great work. The people who care about being really good at their job will be members of CIMSPA, and they will only take CIMSPA approved courses and those kinds of things. And I think, we need to find a way where that even though it's still voluntary, where that becomes the standard that everyone is aspiring to. I think to the point around people making a career change, I think that's really important. I would love to encourage more people to come across, because as I said, I found that the life experience that I had and the fact that I hadn't always been an exerciser and I had been very overweight and all of those kinds of things made it much, much easier to have that empathy that you've spoken about, Owen. So it would be great to be able to encourage that. And I think, again, it's about saying, well, actually, do you want a career that helps people live their best life? Do you want a career that helps people live longer? Do you want a career where you can impact on a large number of people from all different walks of life? And if we can attract those people in, we can leverage those skills that they have in being able to communicate and empathize with people. And then the fact is, as you say, Grace, the evidence exists around how to safely help people who might have some health conditions or, might have some barriers to get active. And I think we can build education routes that make it, relatively simple for people to gather that existing knowledge. And again, to your point, Owen, absolutely, having them have the real world experience is so important. So yeah, maybe they're not taking an apprenticeship, but I know when I did my initial fitness qualifications in the 90s and still, a bit later than that as well, the practical assessment was very very much the opposite of the real world. It was bring a buddy to the exam into a gym where no one else is around and literally show them how to do X number of exercises. And that is not the real world. And that wasn't testing that I could actually do the job. So I think there's definitely more work that we can do around how we assess people and how we give them the practical experience necessary, so that when they get out into the world, they can have that real impact.
I'm glad that we're kind of solving the problem here. There's definitely a lot for us to do. um, Appreciate that just for a moment. If we look at the people around you guys, because I'm glad that you're first of all in different markets, but also you've gotten massive experience. The leaders that we see emerging in the space, and I think Owen, you touched on a couple of times that there's huge operators that have got the most staff, they're implementing the most number of clubs, they have the most number of members. Ireland's obviously a bit different in that market because we're more fragmented and hotel-based culture, but still globally we seem to have the biggest players getting bigger, and there's more acquisition and there's more consolidation of the industry. If you're looking at the leaders in the space, right, and who you see as being impactful in your area, like who is in your club or in your area that's impactful, who are those leaders that you think are, helping to solve some of the problem here and are going to leave an impact on the world and are better able to go, you know what, this is a philosophy that aligns with what we're doing, which is around health and mass population. Who are those leaders? Let's call them out, because there's a lot of what I'd say is the big names in the industry. They're always being talked about, and we'll have lots of them on the podcast. But we have the unsung heroes doing actually a lot of the groundwork and most impactful work. So who are they in your world? Owen, you go first.
In our world, in our facilities, in our facilities specifically, our leaders, we've recently promoted two of our female staff actually, and now they're our supervisors. So they're essentially running both facilities, and um, I've spoken to them on numerous of times, and we're working with them on this. We feel that they are on their way to being champions and ambassadors for health in Limerick. And we want to extend that nationally. So, with Christina and Susan, I think that they both can play a big role. And it's only they're only realizing it now that they can actually have this impact, because when you get into this industry, and for them it was, essentially it started off as you know, work, and having to and doing their job, but now they're taking a step back with us and been able to see the broader landscape and the broader impact that they can have on people. So we're very excited about their ability to lead, and their ability to be those champions in the future. Um Currently, I think as well, it's important to note that our leaders are, as probably we have to be a collective leader. Nice plug there for the collective. We need to
Thanks,
we
Owen.
need to we need to, although there's big players, there's, I think, in Europe there's twice the growth in boutique markets than there is in America. So as a collective, we need to be, strong in what we see as our standards and our voices for, national government bodies or the health industry or the insurance industry, for example. And I think that um being being strong as a collective and would be able would help us in solving a lot of the issues that we spoke about today. Like as you said, the Irish market is fragmented. Those champions and those leaders aren't as prominent because they're working from, isolated, facilities. Whereas I think that if we work together and we have those champions within working together to prop up the industry, I think then we'll go a lot further.
Give us the full names of Christina and Susan to make sure we can call them out and shout them out afterwards.
Susan Potter is operating our life facilities, so our active life centers, and Christina Pupiet. I've struggled with her second name, but she's running our Ballysimon facility, our Matchbox Fitness facility. Fantastic. So they're both doing fantastic jobs. Yeah,
brilliant. Love it. Again, the unsung heroes are something I'm big on. Lou, who are the emerging leaders from your perspective?
So I had to think about this question and I thought who I wanted to give a shout out to. And I wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Marlies de Vivo. So Marlies, I met when she was doing her PhD around physical activity in pregnancy. And obviously we had common interests then. She's a kinesiologist by background. So again, someone who comes from, she's South African as well. So she comes from a great sort of sporting nation and someone who was very much always involved in physical activity and sport. But developed this interest when she came to the UK around pregnancy. And since completing her PhD, she established the Active Pregnancy Foundation along with her co-founder, Sally Kettle, who's a transatlantic rower. So I'm in very esteemed company working with both of them. But Marlies also now is the program manager for the National Centre for Sport and Exercise Medicine in the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre at Sheffield Hallam University. So the fact that she manages to do that and co-run a small but highly impactful charity, I find incredible. And she does it all with a great sense of sort of humbleness. And I think she's a shining example of if you have a passion for something and you feel like you have a way to make a difference, to just go for it. As I said, the Active Pregnancy Foundation has only been established for 5 years now, but already really in the central space in terms of policy change, in terms of real world impact, and is growing from strength to strength. But she's also very much now able to make an impact in nationally in terms of sport and exercise medicine as well. So yeah, I just think she's an inspirational leader in the sort of sport exercise space.
Love it. I mean, we could talk about this all day. I know we have lots more to talk about, but I think the summary for me is that we can't all be experts in everything, right? And that we have to work together. The beauty of the industry that we operate in is everyone's passionate. There's lots of great people who are focused on different parts of it because it's a complex issue, right? We have different population segments, different timings, different challenges, chronic diseases, behavioral aspects. So there's so much complexity to it. We have to work together to tackle this in a bite-sized way. And I appreciate that for those of us that have expertise in one area, there's someone else's expertise in another. We just physically have to figure out how do we tie those dots, connect those dots in order to work together collaboratively to help solve the problem, because it is global, it is huge, and it's one that is, from an opportunity, from a business perspective, is huge, but from a population health perspective is also huge. We could talk about this all day, guys. Thank you so much. I would love to continue the conversation, as I know I will, with both of you separately. But for now, thank you. And from the collective, thank you very much. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Grace.
Thank you for listening. You can connect the dots with others by sharing this podcast with colleagues and teammates. At wearethecollective.world, you can join a professional network, avail of professional development, and engage your support team. We collaborate on the shared pursuit for gender balance in health and business. Until next time, keep connecting the dots.